Welcome back to the Nancy Levin Show. Boy, are you in for a treat today. I have been so looking forward to bringing my guest, Lucy Meggeson, here to you. Lucy has worked in production at BBC Radio 2 for several years, followed by a brief stint as a detective.
Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
I know, right? Right? Before becoming the host and producer of her own podcast, Thrive Solo, which I have had the privilege of being a guest upon when it was formerly called Spinsterhood Reimagined.
Oh, yeah.
And this podcast celebrates all things single, child-free, and personal growth. She also created and runs a membership community, Thrive Solo, for single women who are passionate about living their best lives, regardless of their relationship status. Her very first book is out right now, and I'm going to show it to you.
Oh my God.
I know, right? And it is so fabulous that it has two titles. So if you happen to be listening from the UK, this book is called Shiny Happy Singles. And if you are in the US and Canada, her book is called Thrive Solo. And like I said, it is out right now. It's about embracing the freedom and opportunity that a single, child-free life affords. Hi, Lucy.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me. It is so lovely to see you. And as I said at the very beginning, when I first came on Zoom, I was like, wow, you are looking hot. So thank you for having me. And it's just great to chat to you again, because the last time we properly spoke was, like you said, when you were on my podcast.
Yes.
And it was just, I fell in love with you then. And it was just such a great conversation. So I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
I felt the same way about you. I felt like the minute we met, I felt such a sisterhood with you, because let's just call it what it is. It's not necessarily a popular position to be happily single and child-free.
No, it's really not. But it's funny, because actually I love kind of challenging this question mark over, can you really be happily single and child free? I quite enjoy swimming against the tide and sort of being different in that way.
Yeah.
And really just being on this mission to show the goddamn world that life as a single child-free woman, child-free, childless, a woman without kids, however you want to say it, gets to be awesome too. And as you know, one of my main messages is that being single and not having kids, it's no better, it's no worse than being married without them. It's just different. But the truth is that it's equal. It's like, it's just different. It's like any life path has joy, has sorrow, has dark, has light. But being single and not having kids gets to be just as fabulous as being married and having them,
Amen. So again, I got the book right here. And in the introduction, you very clearly say, I aim to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the state of being called happily single and child-free is very much achievable. It's important to point out from the beginning that I'm not trying to suggest that being single and child-free is necessarily better than being in a couple, only that it isn't worse.
Yeah.
And I just loved that. I mean, it's so crystal clear. As a woman who is child-free by choice, single by choice, I do not date. I personally have zero desire to couple up, to be partnered, any of it. I find it is so much more impactful to the world to have children, and even really to be in relationship, that I really am dumbfounded sometimes why people feel the need to have their say about how I'm living my life, because it's far less impact on the world the way I'm choosing to live.
Totally, 100%. I mean, and that environment and the planet itself is just one of the many reasons that actually we need to start just taking a beat and asking ourselves, is this what I really, truly want? And just before we hit record, you and I were talking about the fact it's incredible how the narrative among so many people still is, well, what's wrong with you if you're not having kids? Why don't you want to have
Right.
kids? And there's this constant question of like, but this is what women are here to do. And this is what you should do if you're a woman, if you're like a normal woman. And actually, there are so many reasons to completely flip that on its head and ask the absolute reverse of that, which is, why do you want them? And are you
Right.
sure that it is right for you
Right.
to be having them? Because this is part of the problem. Not to mention the fact that we're massively overpopulated and all the many, many reasons which I talk about in the book, as to why it's not great for the planet. Or I talk about it. I had a fabulous guest on called Nandita Bajaj, who works for a company called Population Balance. And she basically, I do a massive quote from her in the book about the impact that overpopulation is having on the planet. But aside from that, getting married and having kids, both those things have been over romanticized.
Oh
Yet
my God.
somehow, yeah, but somehow we still find ourselves tripping up to get down the aisle and to have children without truly questioning whether it is the right choice for
Yeah.
us, because
Yeah.
there is no doubt that not every single woman is meant to have kids or even necessarily wants to have kids.
Right.
I mean, you and I are a
Yeah.
case in point.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is really important to point out is how many children are there out there who are born to parents who aren't necessarily the perfect model of parents. So many kids are not in a great situation. And there are so many, not to mention the difficulties of actually being a parent, but so many children are born into families that perhaps if those two parents had actually asked themselves, should we have kids? Maybe they
Yeah.
wouldn't have gone down that road. But because of the societal narrative and because it is so ingrained in us that we should have kids, many, many, many people are doing it without questioning whether it is actually right for them or whether they even want that from their lives.
Yeah. Which is why I think that this book you've written is really, it's a groundbreaking, unapologetic manifesto. That's how I feel about it. It
Thank
is
you.
reclaiming the narrative around single, child-free women. And it's not aimed at fixing singlehood. This is a joyful celebration of a path that is too often cast aside. And I really want to hone in on this. This book, your podcast, your community is really for women who are happily solo, struggling to get there, or simply curious about what an empowered single life can really look like. And what I love so much about you is you're fucking funny. So
Thanks.
it's through humor, through honesty, deeply personal reflection, as well as sharing stories of others, that you really invite us in to stop apologizing for our independence and to start celebrating it.
Yeah, well, bless you. Thanks so much for your incredibly kind words. And, I love the way that you described the book. I take that as a huge compliment. But I guess that actually, although there have been plenty of books written about being single and plenty of books written about not having
It's the
kids.
combo platter.
Yeah. And it's not only this sort of combo, I think it's also the fact that it's the combination of both of those things and celebrating it. Because
Absolutely.
more often than not, most books I think about being single, I think it's fair to say that there is this sort of underlying assumption that we are all trying to unsingle ourselves.
Right.
And my message is always, whether or not you get into a relationship somewhere down the line,
Yeah.
being single gets to be great. Your life gets to
Yeah.
be great right now,
Yeah.
with or without a partner. And so, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you kind of, diving into the book a bit, because it does feel like a big deal. And it does feel like something that perhaps hasn't really been done before in this way, because it's just not a life that is celebrated, because there's so much negative stigma around both being single and not having kids. And it's time that the truth was out, because as you and I both know, it gets to be fucking fantastic.
It does. It does. And one of the things I love that you share early on, you say that being singled and child free can be beer and Skittles if we let it. I'm curious, like, what was the moment for you that you realized this wasn't just possible, but this really is your truth, and that this enjoyment, empowerment, embracing of it was yours for the taking, instead of what historically is cast upon us in terms of pity or poor you, or the worst personally that I feel is, oh, just wait, you'll change your mind. Or, Disney and Jerry Maguire did us no service in the, just wait, your prince will come, or your princess will come, or whatever. So when was it for you that all of this crystallized, that this became a choice, and that it was the choice you really wanted to inhabit?
Well, it's funny because I think it was almost more of a dawning realization, although there was a moment, which is how, all of this started, the sort of idea to write a book and create a podcast and all of that. And actually, it was during lockdown. And it was one beautiful summer's afternoon, and I was sitting outside on this bench, and I was reading through some messages in a WhatsApp group with my sort of closest, oldest girlfriends, all of whom, are coupled up with kids. And I don't know what it was, but it just occurred to me in that moment that I just felt really, really sort of smug. And I had this moment of just like, oh my gosh. Like, I was reading these messages, and this was the days of freaking homeschooling children, and people realizing that they didn't want to be with their partner, and all of these things that were happening in lockdown. And ironically, all the sort of narrative around, oh, the poor single people living on their own, whereas I think quite a lot of us were just like quite enjoying ourselves, actually. But I had this moment where I thought to myself, oh my God, why is nobody talking about this? And I think in the couple of years leading up to that point, I just felt really, really happy for no other reason than I just felt happy. There was no guy on the horizon. I was so single that it wasn't even funny. When you're so single that both you and I know this, it's like when you're the kind of single that you and I are, where there is no one that's just kind of gone off the scene, and there is no one who is like about to be on the scene. There's no sort of potential. There's no, we're not out there trying to make it happen because whatever, we're just busy getting on with our lives. And so those two moments, it really occurred to me that, oh my gosh, I'm actually so grateful for my life. And also around that same time, something occurred to me that had never really occurred to me before, which was that actually I like myself so much more when I'm single. I
Yes.
feel like I am so much better
Yes.
in so many ways when I'm on my own. I feel like I am the best version of myself as a single woman without kids. And again, this was something that sort of I think had been dawning on me sort of very gradually, but around about the sort of 2021 time, so 4 or 5 years ago, it really started hitting me. And then as soon as I kind of realized it for myself, that is when I wanted to start talking about it, because it suddenly felt really bizarre and really unfair that my life situation that I felt really great in,
Yeah.
it felt really unfair and really unjust that the world still saw my life, i.e., someone who is single and didn't have kids, as somehow a bit sad or a bit pathetic, or well, she hasn't quite made it, or well,
Or
what's wrong with
less
her?
than.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
less than.
Yeah.
And in fact, the less than narrative is one that I find particularly toxic and just so negative. This idea that we are less than. And also, it's this idea that no matter what you might be doing with your life, you might be rocking it. You might have just written a bloody book or whatever it is.
Right.
But somehow it's not quite as good as getting married and having kids, even if the marriage is shit, the kids are drug addicts, causing you massive amounts of stress and anguish. Because, without those things, you are still less than, no matter whether you're rocking your life.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. It really is.
Yeah. One of the things, the premise of everything that you're sharing, and even just right here, because society really does equate partnership with success, and that there is this whole damaging normative unconscious that we are dealing with.
The couple norm.
The couple norm, exactly. Yeah. And there's such emphasis placed on that no matter where you look. And I'm so grateful that you have taken such a bold stand. You've got your megaphone out to share that there is another way. And one of the things I so appreciate, and I know we talked a bit about this when I was on your podcast as well, because I think both of us love reclaiming the word selfish.
Yes.
And you have flipped the script on selfish, really revealing it as a pathway to service and wholeness. Yeah. And taking care of ourselves actually is what needs to be the primary focus point. We need to prioritize our own well-being to show up for ourselves and show up for others. And I would love to, my listeners have heard me talk about selfish till I'm blue in the face. So I would love for you to take a little time here and just talk about what reclaiming selfish means for you and for thriving solo.
Yeah, I mean, I want to quote one of my favorite quotes, which is, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think that really says it all. Yes. Because the truth is, and especially the state of the world today, let's not even go there. There is so much darkness going on. And dare I say that a lot of that darkness is happening because people don't take the time to go inwards and to truly find out who they are and understand that wholeness has to come from within. And going back to that quote, when you do the things that light you up, that make you feel excited, you essentially spread that joy into the world. And you give people permission to do the same, which is why the selfish myth is exactly that. It's a fucking myth. Excuse my French listeners.
No, yes.
It truly is. Because actually, by being, quote, selfish, we are taking the time to look after ourselves, and actually looking after yourselves and doing the work on yourself, doing that sort of inner work to become the best version of yourself. What that is doing is helping the rest of the world. And it's funny because so many of us, we're all very good at going, oh yeah, this is shit, the world is shit, and that's bad and that's terrible, but are we actually doing anything about it? Well, most people are probably not, dare I say it, or a lot of people are not actually doing. They're kind of watching what's going on, they're getting all anxious, they're getting worried, they're moaning and they're complaining, but they're not actually doing anything to change the things that they're worrying and moaning and complaining about. When you take the time to go inwards and do things, as I say, that really light you up and make you feel alive, that actually is the best way of helping the rest of the world. Because if everybody did that, if every single person did that, this world truly would be a better place. So I think actually, by being single and not having kids and having all of this time or whatever, actually, it is the least selfish thing you can do. And also, when you get to take time for yourself and make sure that your cup is full, it's that classic thing, you've got to put your seatbelt on first before you can help anyone else. But what you're doing by improving yourself and taking time to look after yourself is you're then showing up as the best version of yourself for the people that you love. And that really is the best thing that you can do, not just for the people that you love, but for the sort of wider community as well, and the wider world ultimately. So I think that's what being selfish means to me.
I love it. Thank you. Yes, because we're so aligned on this. And then sort of piggybacking on this, or sort of next to this, is really the way we talk about freedom and solitude and sanctuary in terms of what I will often say is what I love most about being single is I don't need to take anyone else into account for my choices.
Yeah.
And that, single and child free, that's for me one of the greatest pieces. And to me, that's freedom. Yes, you can call it selfish, and I will own I am selfish, but it's the freedom piece that I get to really choose what works for me and what doesn't. And what I'll also just sort of seed this with, because I know that this is another piece, like when you said in the WhatsApp group, the smug feeling of being single and child free, because I know that well too. People with kids who will say to me, blah, 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 reason 1,000,003 not to have children or not to get married, or, because they know. And so really doubling down on this freedom is not a consolation prize, it's a reward. Exactly. And it is something that we can really take ownership of. And even the piece around living alone.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Oh my gosh. The heaven that is.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine living with another human being. I know you've got your cat, but I can't imagine living with a human.
Absolutely. I mean, just to pick up on what you were saying about freedom, first of all,
please.
this is one of the things that blows my mind on a regular basis, is the fact that these incredible benefits and advantages that come with being single and not having kids are so underrated. And freedom is kind of obvious one that people always, everyone sort of knows that, everyone kind of thinks of that. It absolutely amazes me that these kinds of things like freedom are not appreciated more. And I think, again, it's because what we do is we brush off things like freedom because we are led to believe, and we're conditioned to believe, that being married and having kids is the pinnacle of success. So we brush off the things that we lose when we get into a relationship and when we have kids. And actually, the truth is that some of those things are not to be brushed off, freedom being one of the main ones. Peace, this is another one that I talk about a lot on the podcast. I've talked about it in the book. There are so many underrated benefits and so many underrated advantages of being single, and peace is one of them. I mean, ultimately, what do most of us want? Most of us want to feel peaceful, right? Most of us want to feel peaceful, and actually being single and not having kids lends itself to a life of peace. So obviously. But again, it's one of those things that, when you get married and you have kids, of course, your life is going to be less peaceful because you have a husband and you have kids and blah, blah, blah. But again, it's something that is just, it's brushed off as if it doesn't mean anything. Another thing that I talk about is sort of emotional stability, and the fact that when you don't have anyone else to worry about in your immediate life and anyone else to answer to, and anyone else's moods to sort of navigate on a day-to-day basis, that's one of the things I love the very most about being single and not having kids, is just I know where I am from an emotional sense. And that is huge. So freedom, peace, emotional stability, all of the other things that come with being single and not having kids. Again, it just blows my mind that these things are not talked about, not even really brought into the light. It's almost like it doesn't occur to people that a single life without kids could in any way match married life with them,
Yes. Everything you just said, I just want to amplify and double down on, because what I really came to realize is that I have a challenging time self-regulating when I am around other people. I have a hard time regulating around others. And when I am on my own, I can really self-regulate. And totally. I think it's important to say, for me, because I do a lot of work with people who are people pleasers, peacekeepers, conflict avoiders, people who don't want to rock the boat, people who have very leaky boundaries. And I have been all of those things. A lot of it was because I never had such a solid sense of myself before getting into the relationships I got into, where I lost myself entirely.
Totally.
And now to be able to be in a place where I know myself, I love myself. I cherish my time with myself. I
Yeah,
really
same.
look at alone as with me.
Yeah.
There is no negative connotation with me inside of me, right? And
Yeah.
so that for me is the biggest celebration, that just like what you said, I get to wake up in the morning and I'm not fielding anyone else's energy or
Yeah.
mood. I'm not trying to be a chameleon. I'm not people pleasing. I'm not peacekeeping. I, in fact, get to just check in with what's here and what's true and what's real and operate from there.
Completely. And I mean, it truly is a joy. I resonate with everything that you just said, and I feel exactly the same way. I begin my morning most days with my morning routine. I get up at 5. I have time for meditation. I have time for a workout. I have a time for a morning walk. All of these things, exactly like you say, to emotionally regulate and to just bring myself back into balance. And like you say, you're not dealing with somebody else's moods and you're not having to navigate other people. And especially not just with a partner, but with kids too. There is just something so incredibly freeing about that. And it's such a gift. This is the thing that people, I think, really do not realize or do not acknowledge, that actually being single and living alone can be such a gift. And the same as you, my alone time, my time with me is precious and I love every bloody minute of it. I need it. And it's funny because you mentioned at the beginning sort of you are single by choice. And I never used to describe myself as single by choice because I sort of ended up single, right? I didn't, there wasn't a day where I was like, right, I've decided I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. This is a choice I'm making. I came out of my last relationship and I was single, right? But it wasn't that I ever went, okay, I'm deciding to stay single. I just carried on being single because I just did. But actually, as the last 7.5 years have gone, I find that I am choosing now in a way that I perhaps wasn't a few years ago. Now it is a choice. And my point is that to give up the things that you and I are talking about would be a
Yeah.
huge, huge sacrifice. And honestly, and this is why I now describe myself as single by choice, because the thought of sacrificing all of the wonderful things that come with being single and not having kids, I can't even fathom it. I can't even imagine it. And honestly, although one thing I do say on the podcast is, who knows? I've been in many relationships over the years, and I can't sit here and say I will definitely be single forever. But as far as I know myself, it really wouldn't surprise me if I was. And I know that if that is the case, then that is absolutely fine by me because, again, unsingling myself would be a massive sacrifice. And I honestly don't know what it would take for me to do that. I really, really don't. Even if, and I've talked about this before, but even if Mr. So-called perfect, not that he exists, but just let's say that, my match turned up at the front door, I would at this point in my life politely decline because I'd be like, much as I'm sure you'd be lovely and it would be great and da 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 and everything else, actually, it feels to me like unsingling myself would be a much, much bigger sacrifice than being single tends to be seen to be. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like most
Yes.
people think, oh, well, if you're single, you're like, you're sacrificing being in a relationship and having children and all the rest of it. But
Right.
actually, I see it completely the other way around. I don't know whether that made sense, but
It makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense to me. And I love when you use the term unsingling because it's so much more potent to look at that as something that we don't want to move away from
exactly,
versus
exactly.
equating unsingling with coupling. And
Yeah,
they're not the same. It's not the same thing because
completely.
I'm in agreement with you. What I would have to give up to unsingle is something that is non negotiable for
Yeah,
me to continue living with.
yeah,
I'm not willing to give up what I would have to give up
yeah.
in order
That's the
to
thing.
unsingle.
Completely. And also, the other thing, just to add to that, is even if you or I knew that any potential relationship was going to be a fabulous relationship, even under those circumstances of a fabulous relationship, I still don't want to give up what I would have to give up in order to
Right.
be in that relationship, even
Yep.
if it was the best relationship in the world.
Yeah.
Because I think when you grow to love being single so much, you just love being single, and therefore it doesn't matter how bloody great the guy or the girl is. It's like, well, sorry, I just actually prefer being single, and I
Yeah.
suppose that is what it means to be truly single by
By
choice, when you
choice.
just
Yeah.
you just prefer it. I
Yeah.
mean, Bella DePaolo talks about
Yes.
being
Yes.
single by choice, and Bella, she's amazing. I love her so
Yes.
much, and she's
Yes.
been single her whole life, and
Yes.
she speaks to this so brilliantly, just the fact that her best life. And for those of us who, I think I certainly am single at heart, and I'm pretty sure you are too,
Yeah.
those of us who are single at heart, it's just our best life. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if the perfect guy comes along. It's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. Okay. I have to bring this in
Oh.
because you devoted a whole chapter to sex.
Oh my God, I did, didn't I?
You did. I found it interesting that you did. And I had seen something on your social media. There was a little clip from the
Yeah,
audio that you
yeah,
shared, which I can let you speak to that, but it's different than even where you go in the book. So I'd love for
yeah.
you to touch on that here
Yeah,
if you're
sure.
game.
Put it this way, talking about the fact that I haven't had sex for years
Same.
is never something I thought I would feel actually totally comfortable with it and just couldn't really give a shit.
Right.
Because the truth is that, as I've said in the book, I was always very into sex. I was always a very passionate person, and I had many boyfriends and a lot of sex for a lot of my life. And this is why it's so kind of ironic that I don't fucking miss it. I really don't. It barely ever occurs to me. But as I talk about in the book, I read a book by the incredible Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil. Read it a few years ago. One of the best books I have, probably my favorite book ever, actually. It is so brilliant. And I quote it in the book. And essentially, what Napoleon Hill says is that sex energy is
Yeah.
like the most powerful energy. And if you transmute that energy into creative pursuits, you can basically make freaking amazing things happen. What resonated with me is that when you're not using your sex energy to have actual sex, you can actually throw that energy into, dare I say, more interesting things and more fulfilling things and more awesome things than getting laid. Because, and again, this is coming from someone who always loved sex and enjoyed
Yep.
it and had a pretty good amount of it, I
Yep.
think. But despite that, and I just love what Napoleon Hill says because it made me feel validated. And also, so much of our life, and whether we are loving our life or not, and what our life actually looks like, in reality, is to do with where we're placing our focus. And the truth is
Yes.
that if you are single and you are sitting around hating your single life and telling yourself about how awful it is to be single and how much you're missing sex, you're going to miss sex, right?
Yep.
However, if you are focusing on something else that lights you up, some wonderful project, whatever it may be, some passion project, whatever it is, if you're throwing your energy and your focus and your attention into something else, you simply do not have room to be thinking about, oh my God, I'm single and all of this, which is why I feel so incredibly passionate about this. I think where we're placing our focus really is everything. And, if I was to sit around and watch sex scenes all day, maybe I'd feel like I was really missing sex and I really wanted it. But I don't, because I'm thinking about way more interesting things and doing way more interesting things with my life. And so, I think I kind of wanted to write this chapter partly because I wanted to validate other single women, because I also think there is a bit of a stigma around, oh, you mean you're not having sex? I mean, let's be honest. How many married couples of 20 years are like, shagging on the daily? Probably not very many. It's not as if everyone in this world is having sex like, bunny rabbits 5 times a day. But I kind of want other single women to know that. And not to say that every single woman isn't having sex. I'm sure,
Right.
of
There
course,
are
many of them
plenty who
are.
are. Sure.
Yeah. But the ones that aren't, it is actually okay to not have sex, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And also, it doesn't mean you're necessarily missing out, because apart from anything else, you could actually be throwing those sexual energies into wonderful, wonderful pursuits that actually can probably give you more fulfillment and satisfaction than sex ever could.
I love you. It's so true. Or what I actually find is if I do watch a sex scene or watch a, rom-com or whatever, I'm like, I'm fulfilled. Like that satisfied me. Yeah. It's great that you're in my computer or you're in my TV and you're not here in my bed and I don't have to deal with you. But I feel very satisfied and fulfilled watching it unfold.
Yeah. And do you know what else is really funny actually about the kind of no sex thing is that I am so grateful that I don't have to deal with everything that comes with having sex and just having a guy in my bed. It's so inconvenient on so many levels. It's so fabulous to just not have that in your life. I had the fabulous Cindy Gallop on the podcast a couple of months ago. She's just so brilliant. I don't know whether you know Cindy Gallop.
I don't. Okay.
She's fabulous. And she said not being in a relationship removes a massive layer of bullshit from your life. Yeah. And actually the bullshit that can come along with sex and everything that entails, it's really quite nice just to not have to deal with that at all.
I must have missed that episode, so I will go back and look for it and listen.
You should. She's so great.
I will. Okay, so I really want to talk about you shifting your podcast name away from Spinsterhood Reimagined to Thrive Solo. Really, from Spinsterhood to this self-defined sovereignty. And why was it so important for you in the beginning to really sort of confront and embrace that word spinsterhood and reimagine it?
Do you know, precisely because it has only negative connotations, that is why I wanted to use it. In fact, I remember I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine, Claire. We were walking along the river in Richmond, and I told her that I was thinking about calling the podcast Spinsterhood Reimagined, and she was like, oh my God, I'm not sure about that word. And I said to her, that's exactly why I'm using it. I'm using it because it makes you go, ugh. That is why
it's provocative.
I want to use it. Exactly. But speaking to why I decided to change the name after 3 years, and there is a part of me that feels like, God, have I kind of betrayed myself and single women everywhere or spinsters everywhere? But there were various reasons, not least, I think that the word was putting off not only some listeners, but I think that some guests were just flat out saying no or just not getting back to me because of that word. They just didn't want to be associated with that word. And again, I mean, I know that's exactly why I use the word, but actually when you're trying to kind of run a business and you have a podcast that you've been doing for a long time, there comes a point where you think, actually, am I at this point cutting off my nose to spite my face?
Absolutely.
In a way. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons. But also, one of the main reasons why I changed the name to Thrive Solo is because aside from being passionate about changing the narrative around being single and child free, my true passion is personal growth and development and helping women understand that they get to live a really awesome life and they get to quit the job that they hate that's making them miserable and create a life on their own terms. I am so unbelievably passionate about this whole thing. This is what my second book's going to be about. I'm determined, absolutely determined to write a book on this subject. And I thought that the term Thrive Solo spoke more to that side of me. And it just gives me, I think, more scope to talk about the personal growth stuff and the kind of spirituality and manifestation and all of those topics that I'm really, truly passionate about, as well as talking about being single and not having kids. So those were two of my reasons. Yeah.
I so appreciate that. And again, we're so aligned. I mean, it is all about living on your own terms and something about this particular period of life, midlife, wherever we find ourselves, reevaluating and choosing differently and realizing that we have a choice that we may not have known we had in the past. Part of me wishes I had never gotten married and I could always have been a spinster. I know I have a friend who's a lesbian, and it's called a gold star lesbian if you've never slept with a man. And so there was part of me that wanted to be like a gold star spinster. But the irony, of course, is that I would never in a million years be having this conversation with you, because this whole blossoming of the last 15 years of my career came out of my marriage and divorce, ironically. Yeah. So I will always be grateful from that perspective. I love the way that you're presenting this, though, in terms of the shift from Spinsterhood Reimagined to Thrive Solo, because it is about the thrive piece. It gives equal emphasis to thriving and being solo. And so it's perfect. And it is.
Oh, thanks, Nancy.
I love that this is the title of your book. And again, the book is out now. Thrive Solo in the US and Canada. Shiny Happy Singles in the UK. Exact same book with just a different title.
Yeah, it is the exact same book. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
It gets a bit confusing.
I know. Lucy, I honestly feel like I could talk to you for hours. I just love you. I appreciate you. I love the work you're doing in the world. I feel this is so important, that you are standing in your truth, in your power, with a megaphone and a microphone, and, just amplifying it for all women so that we can really trust ourselves to be able to thrive solo.
Nancy, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fabulous to talk to you. I could carry on talking to you for hours as well, but thank you so much. And just one more thing that I would love to say to the listeners, and actually this is more about thriving than being solo, but one of the things I'm so passionate about sharing is that we just have so much more agency over our lives than we think we do. And we have to make the choice to get out of that victim mentality, which, boy, oh boy, have I sat in for many years of my life. We have to get out of victimhood and realize that we get to have choice over what our lives look like. And also just finally, just to say to any of the single listeners out there, please know that it is more than possible to thrive solo. It is more than possible to be happily single. And I tell you what, when you get used to it, you might start wondering whether you actually ever want to give it up.
I love it. Lucy, thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome.
Yes, and for everyone listening, go grab your copy of Thrive Solo or Shiny Happy Singles, depending on where you live. And I'll be back again with you next week.
Thanks so much. Lots of love.